Well, hello and welcome. I'm glad that you're here with us today as we continue our chronological read through of the Bible. Our last time together, we read about Korah's rebellion and how God made it clear that his commandments or that his commands about who had what role in the worship life of his people really was not up for negotiation. What God said is the way it was supposed to be. Today, God speaks to Aaron directly to make it clear that the Levites are still to do the work that's assigned to them. Additionally, the Levites as a whole were responsible for any offenses against the sanctuary. In other words, the entire tribe was to guard and protect the sanctuary and to assure that it functioned properly. And Aaron's family, which is within the Levites, but Aaron's family was responsible to see to it that the priesthood functioned properly. Nothing should ever be allowed or done to bring shame on the tabernacle or on the priesthood. The Levites took care of things outside the tabernacle itself, and the priests handled things inside the tabernacle. The Levites were responsible to the priests, and the priests were responsible to God, all on pain of death. Notice also how God refers to their duties as a gift. Yes, a gift from Him. This is not something that they earned. It's not something they deserved. It's simply a gift from God, and it should joyfully be accepted as such a thing. The various tithes and offerings that were given by Israel were intended by God for the support of the Levites and the priests. The Levites received the tithes of Israel, and then they tithed on that, which was received by the priests, who in turn tithed on that, which was then given to God. In this way, all received a portion, all return a tithe, and both the Levites and the priests can devote themselves entirely to their work before the Lord. Chapter 19 then begins to deal with the issue of death. Because of their rebellion, this entire generation was to die out in the wilderness, and a new generation would come up to honor God and to take the promised land as God had told them that they would. Now, death is unclean because it's not a part of God's perfect creation. It came from outside because of sin. So even touching a dead person made one unclean for 7 days. Let me go back a second. Death is unclean because when God finished creation, there was no death. God saw that it was very good, and there was no death. Death came after sin and is therefore unclean. So because it came from the outside, death was unclean. Even touching a dead person made one unclean for 7 days. There were ritual washings to attend to on the third and the seventh day before one was again clean and able to re-enter the religious and community life of God's people. This uncleanness of death may help you better understand some of the things that happened in Jesus' life as well. The Jews were insistent that the bodies not be left on the cross when Jesus was crucified, that his body nor the body of the thieves would be left on the cross after sundown, as that would make a holy day unclean. Sepulchres were generally whitewashed so that people didn't accidentally come into contact with bones or death in some other way. Remember Jesus telling the Pharisees that they were like whitewashed tombs? They looked nice on the outside, but they were spiritually dead on the inside. That's where that comes from. Now, after Christ's resurrection, death no longer makes us unclean because Christ has defeated death and gives us also the victory over death that leads to eternal life with him. By the time we get to chapter 19, a lot of time, let me put it a different way. A lot of time passes between the end of chapter 19 and the beginning of chapter 20. We're suddenly near the end of the 40 years of wandering in the wilderness. A single verse notes the death of Miriam, stating simply that she died and that she was buried in Kadesh. And now that the children of Israel are back at Kadesh, they have the same problem that they had before when they were there. No water. And just for good measure, they remind Moses, and therefore God, that there's no variety in their food either. They complain that they would be better off dying in the wilderness as their parents and grandparents had done. Well, Moses and Aaron do as they had always done, and they go to the Lord, who tells them what to do to get water for the people. God tells Moses to take his staff and along with Aaron to speak to the rock, and it will bring forth water, this particular rock. We're not really told why Moses goes astray here, but he does things rather differently than he normally did. For starters, he calls the people rebels, and he infers aloud that he and Aaron are bringing water out of the rock. Must we bring water out of this rock for you? And then he strikes the rock twice, rather than just speaking to it as God had commanded. God is very displeased with Moses' sins here and tells him that neither he nor Aaron will enter the promised land as a result of this. Israel is now moving quickly toward the Jordan River so they can cross over into the promised land soon. The most direct route is through the country of Edom. But the Edomites, by the way, are descendants of Esau. That would be Isaac's brother, Israel's brother, Esau. The Edomites refuse to allow Israel to move peacefully through the land. Instead, they force Israel to go around, adding some very low and very hot terrain to their journey, likely not doing anything for the disposition of the people who have been complaining about the difficulty of this journey to start out with. Chapter 20 closes with the death of Aaron. Just prior to his death, his role as high priest is transferred to his son Eleazar on Mount Hor in the sight of all of the people. Thus the people are never without a mediator, and the people know that Eleazar is now the legitimate high priest. You might remember from a few days ago how there was how Korah's rebellion had to do with whether or not all of them could be priests, and God made it clear that only Aaron's family would be the priests. That concludes our reading for today. May God be with you. May He bless you. I pray that as you continue to read, that you continue to learn and to grow and to understand more things about the not only the Old Testament, but even things that happened during Christ's time. May God be with you and bless you. I look forward to meeting with you again tomorrow.